Story 1: The Locked Room Mystery. I was excited to have the house to myself for the weekend. My parents were out of town, and my sister was visiting friends. I had the entire place to myself, and I planned to binge watch my favorite shows, eat junk food, and sleep in. It was going to be perfect. On Friday night, I was lounging on the couch, halfway through a movie, when I heard a strange noise upstairs. It sounded like a door creaking open. I paused the movie and listened carefully. The house was old, and it made all sorts of weird noises, but this one was different. It sounded deliberate. I decided to investigate. Grabbing a flashlight, I slowly made my way up the stairs. As I reached the top, I saw that the door to the guest bedroom was slightly ajar. I was sure it had been closed earlier. I pushed it open with my flashlight and shined the beam around the room. Everything seemed normal. The bed was made, the dresser was in place, and there were no signs of anyone being there. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe the wind had pushed the door open. I closed the door firmly and went back downstairs. I settled back into my movie, trying to forget about the noise. A little while later, I heard it again. This time it was louder, and it sounded like footsteps. My heart started pounding. I paused the movie again and listened. The footsteps were coming from upstairs, moving slowly and deliberately. I grabbed a baseball bat from the hall closet and headed back upstairs. I wasn't sure what I was going to do if I actually found someone, but I felt better having something to defend myself with. When I reached the top of the stairs, the guest bedroom door was open again. I cautiously entered the room, bat in hand. I checked under the bed, in the closet, and behind the curtains. There was no one there. I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. I decided to lock the door this time, just to be sure. I stepped out into the hall, pulled the door closed, and locked it with the key that hung from a hook on the wall. I went back downstairs, feeling a little more secure, but my peace of mind didn't last long. About an hour later, I heard the door creak open again. This time I knew it couldn't be the wind. The door was locked. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Something was definitely wrong. I called my best friend, Jake, and told him what was happening. He offered to come over, but he lived across town, and it would take him a while to get there. I decided to wait it out and stay alert. I sat on the couch, gripping the bat, and kept my eyes on the stairs. I heard the footsteps again, this time moving faster. They sounded like they were coming down the stairs. My heart was racing, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I was about to call the police when I saw something that made my blood run cold. The locked door at the top of the stairs was slowly swinging open. I couldn't move. I was frozen in fear, staring at the door. Then I saw a figure step out into the hallway. It was a man, dressed in black, with a hood covering his face. He started to walk down the stairs, and I knew I had to do something. I tightened my grip on the bat and forced myself to move. Just as he reached the bottom of the stairs, I jumped up and swung the bat as hard as I could. I hit him square in the chest, and he stumbled backward, falling onto the stairs. I didn't wait to see if he got up. I ran to the front door, flung it open, and sprinted outside. I ran to my neighbor's house and banged on the door until they answered. I was out of breath and panicking, but I managed to tell them what had happened. They called the police, and I stayed with them until they arrived. The police searched the house but found no sign of the intruder. The locked room was empty, and there were no signs of forced entry. They told me it was probably a prank or a case of mistaken identity, but I knew better. Someone had been in my house, and they had somehow gotten into that locked room. I stayed with my neighbor until my parents got home. They didn't believe my story at first, but after seeing how shaken I was, they decided to change the locks and install a security system. I never spent another night alone in that house again. Story 2: The Shadow in the Basement. My parents had left for the weekend, and I was looking forward to some alone time. I had the house to myself, and I planned to make the most of it. I was going to have a movie marathon, order pizza, and just relax. It was around 9 p.m. when I decided to do some laundry. The laundry room was in the basement, and I usually avoided going down there at night. It was dark and creepy, but I didn't want to run out of clean clothes, so I grabbed my laundry basket and headed downstairs. As I was loading the washing machine, I heard a faint noise behind me. It sounded like a soft rustling, almost like someone was moving around. I turned around, but the basement was empty. I brushed it off as my imagination and went back to my laundry. A few minutes later, I heard it again. This time it was louder and closer. I spun around quickly, and for a split second, I thought I saw a shadow move across the wall. I felt a chill run down my spine. I told myself it was just my nerves, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I hurried through my laundry and rushed back upstairs. I locked the basement door behind me and tried to forget about the noise. I turned on all the lights in the living room and started my movie marathon. I was determined to have a good time, even if I was a little freaked out. About an hour later, I heard the noise again. This time it was coming from the living room window. It sounded like someone tapping on the glass. My heart pounded in my chest as I slowly approached the window. I peered outside, but there was no one there. I took a deep breath and tried to calm down. It was probably just a tree branch or something. I went back to my movie, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I kept glancing at the window, expecting to see something or someone staring back at me. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow move across the wall again. This time it was in the hallway. I grabbed a kitchen knife and cautiously walked toward the hallway. I flicked on the lights and looked around. There was no one there. I checked all the rooms and found nothing. I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. I went back to the living room and tried to focus on my movie. But then I heard a creak coming from the basement door. It sounded like someone was trying to open it. I jumped up and ran to the door, pressing my ear against it. I could hear faint footsteps on the other side. My heart was racing, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to open the door, but I also didn't want to just stand there waiting for whatever or whoever was on the other side to come through. I decided to call my friend Sarah, who lived a few blocks away. I quickly explained what was happening, and she said she would come over right away. While I waited, I kept my ear pressed to the door, listening. The footsteps had stopped, but I could still hear a faint rustling noise. Sarah arrived a few minutes later, and I let her in. I was so relieved to see her. We decided to check the basement together. She grabbed a baseball bat from the closet, and we cautiously opened the basement door. We slowly made our way down the stairs, turning on the lights as we went. The basement was eerily quiet. We checked every corner, every nook and cranny, but we found nothing. There was no sign of anyone having been there. We went back upstairs and Sarah suggested we stay up and keep watch together. We made some coffee and tried to stay awake, but eventually we both dozed off on the couch. I woke up to the sound of the basement door creaking open again. I nudged Sarah awake, and we both grabbed our weapons. We stood there, watching the door, but it didn't move. We decided to check the basement one more time, just to be sure. As we made our way down the stairs, we heard the faint rustling noise again. This time it was coming from behind the washing machine. We approached cautiously, and Sarah shined her flashlight behind it. There, huddled in the corner, was a small, terrified cat. It must have somehow gotten into the basement and had been making all the noise. We were both relieved and a little embarrassed. We managed to coax the cat out and took it upstairs. It didn't have a collar, so we decided to keep it until we could find its owner. We named it Shadow, and it turned out to be the sweetest, most affectionate cat ever. Looking back, the whole experience was pretty scary, but it taught me to keep calm and investigate things thoroughly before jumping to conclusions. And now, I had a new furry friend to keep me company whenever I was home alone. Story 3, The Unwanted Visitor. It was a Saturday night, and I had the house to myself. My parents were out for a dinner party, and my little brother was at a sleepover. I had planned a night of gaming and snacks, and I was really looking forward to it. Around 10 p.m., I heard a strange noise coming from the back of the house. It sounded like a window rattling. I paused my game and listened carefully. The noise stopped, so I shrugged it off and went back to playing. A few minutes later, I heard it again. This time, it was louder and more persistent. I decided to check it out. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way to the back of the house. The noise was coming from the kitchen window. I shined my flashlight on it and saw that it was slightly open. I was sure it had been closed earlier. I walked over to the window and pulled it shut, making sure to lock it. I figured the wind must have blown it open. I went back to the living room and tried to focus on my game, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was off. About an hour later, I heard the noise again. This time it was coming from the front door. It sounded like someone was trying to open it. I muted my game and listened. The noise stopped, but I could hear faint footsteps outside. I decided to call my friend Tom. He lived nearby and often came over to hang out. I told him what was happening, and he said he would come over right away. While I waited, I kept my eyes on the front door, gripping my flashlight tightly. A few minutes later, Tom arrived. I let him in, and we decided to check the house together. We started with the front yard, but there was no one there. We checked all the windows and doors, making sure they were locked. Everything seemed secure. We went back inside and tried to relax. We decided to watch a movie to take our minds off things. But about halfway through, we heard a loud crash coming from the back of the house. We both jumped up and ran to the kitchen. The window that I had locked earlier was wide open, and a chair had been knocked over. My heart was pounding as we scanned the room for any signs of an intruder. Then, we heard footsteps coming from the hallway. We grabbed kitchen knives and cautiously made our way toward the sound. As we turned the corner, we saw a man standing there, dressed in dark clothes with a hood covering his face. He had a crowbar in his hand and was staring right at us. I felt a surge of fear and adrenaline. Tom and I both yelled at the man to get out, but he didn't move. He just stood there, watching us. Then, without warning, he lunged at us with the crowbar. We both swung our knives, trying to defend ourselves. In the chaos, Tom managed to knock the crowbar out of the man's hand, and I shoved him hard, causing him to stumble backward. We took the opportunity to run out the front door and down the street. We didn't stop until we reached a neighbor's house. We banged on the door, and our neighbor let us in. We quickly explained what had happened, and they called the police. The police arrived within minutes and searched the house, but the intruder was gone. They found the open window and the crowbar, but there were no other signs of him. The police took our statements and promised to patrol the area more frequently. My parents came home shortly after, and I told them everything. They were shocked and immediately decided to install a security system and new locks on all the doors and windows. For a while, I was scared to be home alone. The thought of that intruder being in our house still haunted me, but over time I felt safer with the new security measures in place, and I learned to always trust my instincts and never ignore strange noises. That night was one of the scariest experiences of my life, but it also made me more aware of my surroundings and the importance of home security. And it brought Tom and me closer as friends, knowing we had each other's backs in a crisis.